Good morning, all. I'm Kara McGuire again. I've gotten the privilege of speaking with many of you this last year about our Talent Well work. We are so pleased to have Allison Wyatt with us from Edgility Talent Partners today to share a little bit about their perspective on some of the work that they helped design this year. And just appreciate that this is a busy time of year as we head into summer. So thanks for making some space to be with us. If at any point you cannot, I will not be paying attention to the chat because I am not a good multitasker. But if at any point you cannot hear or need to jump in with a quick clarifying question, I'm just going to invite folks to come off mute. This is all family here. We're folks who've been in the work together, so feel free to participate. And we will also make some space for breakout sessions and a chance for folks to make some meaning together as we go along. But without further ado, thanks for joining us for our topic around aligning strategy with talent systems with Edgility Talent Partners. And I'm going to give a little bit of an overview, probably for most of you that you're familiar with, and some of you who are here last week saw this with Sema. But just for folks who may be new, Catalyst Exchange is the organization that I'm supporting with this talent work. We support mission-driven organizations across the sector to connect them to expertise to receive support on transformational outcomes. And in this particular model, our focus was on talent projects. So Talent Well was funded by the Balmer Group. We are 2 years in. It was launched in April of 2024, as many of you know, having been part of the cycle for the whole time. And our goals were to elevate talent strategy, help orgs with recruitment, hiring, development, and comp, to connect orgs to the right consulting support, to help build a diverse network of search and talent consultants, and generate real-time insights with the data. A few things that were unique about this: they were offered wallets that were fairly widespread in order for folks to make decisions about what they wanted to use the dollars for. Folks had 2 years to get into contract with the dollars, so kind of a nice amount of time for impact. And then folks also participated in a cost share where they contributed to the projects as well for investment. Okay. Again, for folks who were here last week, this will look familiar, but just a little bit about what we learned. So we did diagnostics with every organization that was a part of this fund. There were 28 orgs, and saw that talent systems were, in many cases, more fragmented than strategic. We also saw that leadership and workforce planning were really critical components, especially because many of these place-based partners are at a place of scaling and high growth. So the project demand really reflected those needs around building some core talent infrastructure and strengthening leadership. And a lot of the projects that folks chose to fund and fell into those categories. So we had 28 orgs across 17 states. We had 118 capacity building projects with 86 providers. So as you can see, many organizations did multiple projects. The average number was about 4 in the 2-year period, which is actually, I think, fairly high and speedy. Maybe felt that way for many of you. The average project duration was 8 months, and the budgets were between $3,000 and nearly $500,000 for the projects, with the average being closer to 60. I won't talk through this whole slide with a lot of words, but just as an illustration, we thought it'd be helpful to see some of the categories the Talent Well projects fell into. So many of them were around talent strategy, org design, and workforce planning. As we named at the top, many organizations felt like that was a place where they had a need to kind of design systems and figure out how processes would fit together for a talent system as they scaled. And the other largest category was talent acquisition. So essentially many executive searches and other searches that were supporting folks to scale. Leadership development was very close behind that, with leadership development programs, internal leadership capacity support, change management training, executive coaching. So things that were going to help sustain and support current leaders in addition to bringing new leaders into the organization. And many of you shared some feedback for us. Thank you for the gift of feedback just around impact for partners and impact for providers. I'll just highlight that many organizations had a similar experience to what was shared by Focused Community Strategies, which is that there was an opportunity to be proactive rather than reactive around processes. There was an opportunity to formalize some of the systems that were going to support the organization. And I love this last part of the sentence of staff now understanding the why, which is a critical driver for retention. And I think just underscores when you have an opportunity to do a thoughtful long-term project, what kind of meaning you can make for your overall org culture in addition to the process you might be implementing. Our providers were really generous with their feedback as well, and many of you are providers, so thank you for your support with Talent Well. This felt like an opportunity for folks to really try to build off of initial work and do deep investment in one organization. So this provider collective shift supported with design and facilitation of listening sessions, synthesis, co-designing an all-staff retreat, and you can kind of see how they were able to really embed multiple parts of impact and support for an organization to help folks with their communication and organizational culture. Okay, that's all from me. I'm really excited to turn it over to Allison and the team at Edgility Talent to talk more about one of their kind of findings and experiences around connecting talent strategy to strategic plans. I know I went quickly through the Talent Well pieces. I'm assuming this is familiar to many of you on the call, but happy to make space in a little bit to answer any questions or dive more into any of the data points I just shared. Otherwise, we're thrilled to have Allison Wyatt with us this morning. Edgility has been an excellent talent partner to Catalyst Exchange since 2018, and they've supported nonprofits, schools, and other social impact organizations on building sustainable people systems. You can see all the places of specialization. Many of these are things that folks really desired in Talent Well, and we're excited to have Allison's perspective today about how this work feels connected to overall strategy. So without further ado, Allison, I'll be your slide lady over here and keep clicking through, but I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and really lovely to connect with everyone this afternoon. I did want to flag my my partner Carrie Alexander is also here on the call as well, and so I'll give her a chance to introduce herself too. But I want to just emphasize a couple things before we dig in. As the founder of the firm at Edgility, I really started this organization with one primary objective, which was, HR is so often bootstrapped in this sector and so often in a reactive position. And I really wanted to build a suite of services that helped organizations build their talent infrastructure to align with their strategy and their values. And I find that so often it actually happens the other way around, right? We sort of execute these strategies that emerge from the people in our organization and how we structure things without knitting those two things together. And then we're just leaving it to chance. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today because it really was one of the key drivers of why I started the work that I do in the first place. Carrie, I'll turn it to you to introduce yourself quickly before we dig in.
Thanks, Allison, and thank you everyone for having us, particularly everyone at Catalyst Exchange. It's been so great to be a part of this community. I'm Carrie Alexander. I'm a partner at the firm. My background's largely in talent acquisition. I'm coming off of a decade at Isaacson Miller doing executive search in the nonprofit sector. So what I've brought to the firm is a focus on talent planning, growth pathways, succession planning, and how it all connects. And I think that's actually the key to both this presentation, but also what we try to bring to every engagement at Edgility Talent Partners is systems thinking across human capital to do it strategically and find the junctures where things like compensation, performance management, organizational design, job architecture, how it all connects and how, when done well, it all cascades up to support a really strong strategic plan, taking care of the talent to ensure impact for the organization. And so that's largely what we hope to be sharing with you today.
Right. So we're going to focus on 4 key parts of how you do this really well. We always start with why does this matter? Why is this so important, right? The why behind what we're talking about. We're also going to talk about some of the models out there and the operating choices that we need to get right in order to set this all up for success. And then we've broken it down into these 4 core talent systems that we will walk you through to help you understand how you bring each of them into alignment with your strategy. And finally, we also will give some advice on how do you start implementation and rolling this out. And of course, what we're going to also give you all a chance to learn from each other. And we'll do some breakout rooms after we walk through the core talent systems to give you a chance to kind of dig into some of these questions. So starting with why this is so critical, oftentimes what we see is that we look at organizational strategic plans and hopefully they're really clear on what the organization is trying to achieve. What are the defined outcomes that an organization is trying to get to? But what we don't always see is kind of what is it going to take for their team to be able to get them there, right? To actually realize and actualize these aspirations, right? And so that's where like you can have a disconnect between what you want to do and how it happens on an execution side of things. What we think is that talent systems can become really powerful when they align everybody around common goals and objectives, when they make it really clear on who owns what are the roles and responsibilities, what does success look like in this organization, what does my career trajectory look like, and how does my growth support what the organization is trying to accomplish over time, right? We have to tell that story, though. We have to tie those two things together for people. It doesn't just happen kind of organically. And I think that this becomes even more important in our world, because we are operating in a universe where resources are very constrained and we have a lot of competing priorities. We often have functions that are quite bootstrapped. And so we're always having to kind of make trade-offs and judgment calls. So if we don't have real clarity on where we're going and how we're going to get there, and we don't understand kind of how this all ties together, it's difficult for us to be strategic in those day-to-day trade-off decisions that we're making. So ultimately, that's what a real talent strategy can do for you. It can bring all of your aspirations and your strategic plan to life throughout the organization. I want to emphasize one thing, though, because there is a point where the rubber really meets the road. And this is a real journey for most organizations. We're going to talk about 3 really critical steps in that journey. We're going to talk about strategy and getting clear on what your priorities are. We're going to talk about those operating model choices and the systems that can support bringing this all to fruition. But we want to emphasize that at the end of the day, this all gets done through people. And the front line is really your people managers. And so you really have to make sure you've given them the support, the training, and the capacity to execute on this well. Give your staff the sort of clarity in goal setting and in coaching, and making sure that all of your managers are calibrated and things like that. So I just want to emphasize that if you do all the work we're talking about today, don't forget that last step of making sure you're building those people management habits so that once the organization starts executing, you can get to the outcomes you're looking for. Okay, so we've talked about these operating model choices. What do we mean by that? I think that the biggest takeaway that I'd love everybody to kind of leave this with today is that you want to start with strategy questions, not HR tools. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about when we start engaging with organizations about, like, say, performance management or something like that, they're thinking about a technology platform, or they're thinking about best practices they might have heard of, or what their peers are doing. And they haven't taken a moment to figure out, what are we actually trying to accomplish here as an organization? What are the things that we really are prioritizing? And that can be everything from, what are we trying to do better, or where are we trying to grow? Is it that we're moving into new geographies? Is it that we have to increase our fundraising this year? Is it that we need more of that fundraising to come from earned revenue? Is it that we have a quality control concerns? What is the key thing that we're trying to focus on? And then we have to really clarify, what are the trade-offs that matter to us? So sometimes some of the areas where we see tension points when organizations start to grapple with these questions is how much do we want to be customizing different programs or different solutions versus how much do we want to be building for scale with efficiency? If we're a multi-site organization, how are we going to navigate local autonomy versus consistency across the org, right? If we're trying to think about some new things that we've never done before, how do we make trade-offs around innovation and trying new things and standardization? So these need to be part of the conversation, and you need to be clear on them, because you can't build a talent system to support these pieces if you haven't answered these questions first, right? Once you answer those first two buckets of questions, then you can start to think about, okay, so given that, what are the capabilities that are really critical, right? What are the things that really matter and are going to really move the needle for us? And that's really the foundation for now understanding what your talent program is trying to achieve. And so when you start to face design choices, you have this kind of North Star to inform how you go about doing that. Here's a couple of really specific examples. So let's imagine that you're in an organization that is trying to scale your program delivery, and you have lots of different sites around the country. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, are the regional teams going to collaborate with these central roles? What are we going to standardize? Where is there some flexibility, and whose job is what, basically? And that may mean that you need to do more work defining spans of control, or adding some manager depth, or building your frontline leadership bench, right? So there can be talent implications for all of these things. Another sort of example of this would be, let's imagine that you're trying to deepen your equity commitments. And in the past, you've had like a DEI task force, maybe. So that operating implication might be that you're actually going to embed that across your leadership team, not only HR or individuals who've kind of been tasked with some of that work, right? And so you may start to do things on the talent side, like doing a pay equity audit, doing a promotion equity audit, adding some capacity on your frontline managers to train them, right, on these pieces. These are just a couple of examples of, again, where the rubber meets the road. And notice that for many of these, eventually it trickles down to your people, and it's about building their capacity too. Okay, so here's where I'm going to pass it over again to Carrie to actually talk through these systems and what you should be thinking about in each of them.
Thanks, Allison. And let me just pull up, my notes to make sure I've got everything I want to say. Okay, Allison described a North Star. If your strategic plan is that North Star and you're trying to build capabilities that will get you to have impact and achieve and act on and execute on that North Star, that strategic plan, these are 4 talent systems that you can work with and use to get you where you need to go. And so those 4 are talent planning, growth pathways, compensation, and performance management. And you can think of these as levers that you can use and operationalize to achieve what you want to achieve. And as I mentioned in my intro, part of what I want you to think about as we present them is the junctures of the 4, how they connect to one another, because they can't be done in a vacuum. Although you could choose for a year to focus on one, the implications of what you do in one impacts the others and vice versa. So let's start with our first one. Okay, talent planning. This is my favorite. So first you need to ask yourself, what work and roles in our current commitments do we need to sustain to keep going in the direction we're going? That always has to be coupled by considering, what will future growth look like? If we have a strategic plan that's calling for, let's say, working more with local government, and we're looking at our internal bench strength and we're seeing it's not something we've ever done before, but our board and our strategic plan is calling on it, Is this something we can build internally? Is this something we have to buy externally? How do we do that? This is all connected to talent planning. Um, it starts with assessing that strategic plan and thinking about the people, roles, skills, capabilities, and how you're going to get there. So if you could go to the next slide. When we think about it, we think about it on sort of a bifurcated platform of the people and the roles and the connection of the two. And you can see this handy little graph. You want to know that you have the right people and you want to know that they're in the right seat. And so I'm going to walk you through two like sort of common scenarios that we can think about. Let's say you have the right person. How do we know they're the right person? Their values aligned, they are working hard, they care about the mission, they're well liked, they care about equity if that's important to us. That's an example of value alignment, whatever it is. But when we look at them, they're in the wrong seat. They don't have the skills for that seat, but we want to keep them engaged. That's where you think about a lateral move. That's talent planning. We have this right person. We're building this government planning department. Let's move that person over there. It's an example of talent planning. Alternatively, we find we have the wrong person, but it's the right seat. It's a role we need, and we need to find the right person. Can we coach that person into the role? Maybe. That's sort of growth planning. That's figuring out developmentally what they need, and that'll connect to our next slide. Or alternatively, do we have anyone else who can move into that seat, or do we need to go out and find somebody to put in that seat? This is where career pathways and talent planning and growth all connects into the fold. And so if we could go to the next slide. So growth planning. I think we're missing a box here. That's strange. Oh, it's coming in later. There we go. So the structure we have should make strategic work easier. So how do we develop people into who we want them to be? There's two clear pieces to that. It's building career pathways, and that can be done through job architecture. If I'm a coordinator, how do I grow into a program manager? And then how do I grow into a supervisor who oversees that program manager? Is there clear competencies for each of those as I grow in the org? Also, tailoring individual professional growth plans. Here are my gaps. Here are my skills. What do I need to get there? That's how we can get those design outputs. So that's building. That's internally. That's optimizing what we have internally. That's a great thing to do. Allison mentioned resource-stricken environments. That's what we love and also are challenged by in nonprofit land. Doing more with less, which sounds like a compliment when you say that to an organization, but it doesn't always feel that way internally when we're kind of dealing with those lack of resources. If we can build, great. That's where succession planning comes in. But sometimes that's not the option. We can go back to that example I made up about building sort of government relations with local government. Sometimes that means buying someone. That's an external search. Might mean higher compensation, certainly the time and labor to do the search. It could mean borrowing, which in our context means maybe having a contractor or a freelancer, temporary work, part-time work. There's a lot of different things we can do to make that happen. And finally, botting, robot, bot, AI. Is there a way to optimize technology to do what we need to do? These are sort of 4 tools at your disposal as you think about that. Compensation. Rewards should incentivize the desired outcomes. Again, connecting back to the strategic plan. What's the core principle? What are we trying to do here? How do we keep our talent happy? How do we compete externally for talent? How does it connect back to our values? It's important, particularly at Edgility talent planning, that we always set a foundation for fair and consistent pay practices. That's why the firm was founded in the first place. It's something we always build into all of our projects, but it's at its core in compensation. And it should always ensure alignment with your strategy, values, and objectives. Again, connecting back to that strategic plan. How's that done? Through internal engagement, but also external benchmarking, figuring out what's going on currently in the org and then also seeing how other orgs of your size, scope, scale, geography, there's a lot of dimensions to it, are doing it as well. That architecture piece is important. That's sort of the internal engagement, but building that consistency across the levels, the salary bands, progression logic. So growth is visible and defensible. And I'm just going to connect you back sort of to talent planning and growth planning. This job architecture is a huge part of that too. It's organizational design at its simplest, but this is in a compensation context. We talked about equity, a thoughtful implementation, but it's that governance piece. This is where sort of newer and additional policies have to be added to your core philosophy. Defining who you can make exceptions for, which feels like a strange thing to talk about when we're focusing on consistency, but there need to be exceptions sometimes. How compression is handled, and when market moves might trigger a review. Finally, performance management, which should connect daily work to strategy. In our world, a strong performance management system can so directly connect back to that overarching strategy. Organizational goals should lead to department goals, which should lead to individual goals. And this for us is what we call cascading goals. It's the idea that we take that overarching strategic plan, and in the minutia of the day-to-day, every staff member can work towards that impact for the organization. I think the words on this slide are not actually correct for what we want to say, so I apologize for that. We have a newer version of the presentation that we'll make sure goes out after this. First, staff need to be able to clearly see how their work connects back to the overarching strategy. As we at Edgility Talent Partners work with nonprofits to build their performance management frameworks, we also work to ensure that staff know what success looks like in their organization and that it has to be measurable. This means that supervisors ideally are calibrating their ratings. This breeds equity, but it also helps ensure that the organization as a whole understands what true success looks like. And success in this context sometimes means having that impact, hitting that strategic plan and those goals. Supervisor coaching needs to ideally happen regularly rather than in that single annual moment at the end of the year when staff can be caught off guard by the feedback and when they aren't implementing it on a regular basis. This means that regular check-ins, passing on feedback in the moment rather than sitting on it, and discussing any kind of long-term development of staff, again, connecting back to career pathways and professional development. That's really important in performance management if it's going to drive towards that strategic plan. And finally, the outcomes of performance management need to be used effectively to improve fairness and sharpen talent differentiation. This means syncing up performance management results with promotion, development opportunities, and rewards decisions, where the connection of compensation and performance management most clearly aligns. So again, none of these can be done in a vacuum. They all connect back to one another, but these 4 talent systems really are the biggest focus here. And now we lead to breakout rooms. And Allison, I don't know if you want to introduce this project.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we wanted to do is give you actually an opportunity to choose which of these you might want to talk further about with your colleagues. I'm sure that there were probably one of these 4 areas that kind of more than the others sounded very familiar, like, oh yeah, that definitely is something we need to delve into and figure out. So we wanted to invite you to essentially choose which of these talent systems is something that you kind of just, you have like a little red flag up that's like, you just feel like it's not quite working best for you in a way that's aligned with your organizational strategy. And then help each other try to figure out, where is this breaking down for your organization and what would it take to fix it? So at the risk of everybody joining the same room, I don't think that will happen, right? We have a really diverse group of individuals here with lots of different types of organizations. We're going to let you choose your own adventure here. And Kara, if you want to open up those breakout rooms. We'll give you about 15 minutes to discuss. And then we'll come back as a group and share some reflections from that too. I don't know exactly how many people are going to be in all of your rooms, so I typically like to say 3 minutes apiece or whatnot, but just, try to make sure everybody has a chance to share their context, what's breaking down, and kind of brainstorm together some thoughts on how you take the next step to move things forward based on what we've discussed today, or other things you all have tried. Anyone had any aha moments to share? Aha moments with the broader group. Okay. Wow, time flies when you're having good conversation. So before we get into implementation, I want to just invite people to share any aha moments that happened during what I hope was as rich of a dialogue as we had in my group. So I think we both said we were going to steal different things each other were saying at least twice in the conversation. That's when you know it's a good conversation. So yeah, what were your aha moments?
I think my group was, I was in the Growth Pathways group, and it was striking that whether the organization, I come from a pretty large organization, whether it was large or small, some of the issues around growth pathways are the same.
Yeah.
Right. Talent management being a part of it, but also, this is a multi-generational workforce with a different set of needs and a different set of expectations
Absolutely.
of the organization. I think somebody talked about earlier all those things, but being clear about, and it's not always, growth pathways aren't always linear, right? But we have to have something foundational. So that was striking that though we have different size organizations, the issues, the environment, the workforce demands tend to be the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, this work is not easy for any size organization, no matter what. I love that. We often talk about lattice pathways, Lisa, because you're right. It's often not a direct linear path in this space. Other thoughts people want to share?
I'll share. So I chose performance management. Currently, organization, we are revamping talent management and performance management, and we haven't done our evaluations in over a year. We went from about 5 years ago when I first joined the organization, doing 4 evaluations a year to 3 evaluations a year, and then ultimately it stopped. And now we're changing the type of evaluation that we conduct to a 360 review. We've gone through some restructuring, so we have new directors. So I don't necessarily fear that it's most aligned, but I just know that there's going to be a learning curve for everybody. For some individuals, they've never done 360 reviews. There is definitely a training piece that needs to be incorporated so everyone understands, as well as, sorry, I forgot my point. Making sure that the supervisors are trained on the biases, so to ensure that it's fair for all individuals and really aligning the KPIs from the job descriptions to what we're actually evaluating so they're most useful. And yeah, so that's my contribution.
Yeah, I love that you raise the evolution of your plan. And I always ask organizations, like, who here has an organization that never changes, where things are just pretty static and stay the same constantly? Like nobody, right? And so I think that that's a really great point, that even if you have something that's working well, you have to always be keeping an eye on how your organization evolves and make sure you are evolving your talent programs with it. Otherwise, it would be like having a child that you don't buy new clothing for as they grow, right? Like it just won't fit over time. So, great. One more last minute thought, or we'll move on to implementation. So we've talked about a lot here, and I know this can feel overwhelming to try to get all of these ducks in a row at the same time. And so oftentimes what we encourage organizations to do is to sequence and scaffold, right? I think that all of you should have had the takeaway by now that it really starts with the what. It really starts with clarifying the strategy, making sure that you know what you're trying to accomplish. And honestly, it sounds very obvious, but actually in my breakout room, which was talent planning, we were commenting on how few organizations start here. And so it's something we all know we should do. And it's something we so rarely see organizations do, right? It's a step you can't skip. Otherwise, to use a clothing metaphor again, you might be sewing a ballroom gown for a baseball game, right? You got to get really clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish before you start building the thing, right? Okay, so don't forget that step. The next step is really then thinking about, okay, now that I know what we're trying to accomplish here, I really have to look at my entire organizational structure and make sure that my people are aligned and we've got the right roles in the right structure, and that my managers are ready to help execute any changes we're going to make, right? So you have to build the architecture, right? Then you have to start to then think through, oh, okay, now how are we updating all of our systems, right? We just mentioned, oh, we have some new directors. So that means we got to go back and we got to train people, right? Or maybe we decided to shift something in our structure and now all of a sudden we have a new level. And so our compensation program needs to be updated because we didn't have that level when we did this last time around, right? So thinking about how do we keep all of these things current and fresh and relevant to the organization that is evolving constantly. And then, of course, making sure that as we make those tweaks and changes, every time we do that, we need to make sure, A, everybody's aware, and B, our managers are now trained on what this means. I love the example of, oh, we're doing 360 feedback now, and none of our managers have ever done that before, right? To me, that's a wonderful illustration of that. Alexa, you already have that part of the process flagged. You already know we're going to have to do some training. We're going to have to equip people to learn how to do this. So kudos to your organization for issue spotting that. And then the last thing I would say is this should always be organic. You should always be reviewing and refining these programs. So obviously, you're probably looking at goals and strategy once a year. And so if you make any changes, guess what? You got to go right back through this checklist. The good news is if you do this regularly, it's like going to the dentist. If you get your teeth checked once a year or twice a year and cleaned, you don't end up with a root canal, right? It's the same thing with your talent systems. If you're looking at them regularly, then you can just make little tweaks and modifications along the way. If you wait too long, all of a sudden the organization has outgrown the system so much, it feels like a really dramatic overhaul because it is. So make sure you're reviewing and refining things on a really regular basis, and then you won't have massive changes that you need to make unless your organization goes through a massive change, which would make it appropriate, right? Right. I think this is where I turn it back over, right?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, y'all, for as we approach time here, and I want to be responsible to make sure to get everybody to their next meeting on time. Just super appreciate the opportunity, Allison and Carrie, to learn from both of you. I feel like I have 3 people who I'm going to send the recording to of this call and be like, give this a listen on your drive. So know that we're going to share this out afterwards. The Edgility Talent team has other resources posted on their website, which is linked here, their LinkedIn pages as well, so you can connect if you're not already connected. And we're going to be back next week to talk with Daniel's Talent Solutions about placing leaders in the PBP space, which again was kind of our second largest category of work under Talent Well, was this searches and placement for folks. So would love to have you join again if you are interested in that, or feel free to share with others who you think that could be useful for. Allison and Carrie and I will stay on the call for a couple minutes if there's anybody who wants to just do a quick connection or a question, but otherwise really appreciate your time today. Thanks again for being a partner with Catalyst, and we hope to see you soon.